is that social media presence, an individual social media presence, is not a direct correlation of what they want their real persona to be on their inside. Tonight, our featured guest needs no introduction. He is our own Salman Qureshi from the show Think About It. He's an educational leader who has been in the industry for over 10 plus years, working as a teacher, teacher's trainer, as well as a vice principal. He's also an IELTS examiner, a mentor for students for sick kids, as well as a virtual school. He's an individual that is super passionate about making a difference through education. Please join me in welcoming Salman to the studio. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing this evening?
I'm all right. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Of course, excited for this episode, Salman. So Salman, you're an individual that is super passionate about education. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in this space and your continued passion towards kind of wanting to make a difference in this area?
So what I would say is that education is something that's been a part of my life. Obviously, it has been a part of everyone's life since the time they're born. Since the time you open your eyes, you're learning something.
Yep.
So I think my reinforcement was the fact that both of my parents were in education as well. And growing up, I always had questions, and I always tried to rationalize those questions in my head to come up with an answer that would at least befit me, and so I could sleep at night well. Because there were a lot of questions I had about the educational system around me, from the time I was a student up until the time I became a professional. So I think that was the drive, and then my parents were just, I'd say, my counselors and my advisors the whole time throughout the journey.
Wow, that's inspiring. So Salman, like you've traveled and lived in different countries, right? So you've lived in the Middle East, you lived in Asia, you lived in UK, as well as Canada. Do you see any patterns that has worked really well for our education system and things that we could be really improved upon in Canada?
So what I would say is that things that worked really well would be every time you give autonomy to students, to teachers, and to anybody who's directly related with the education process, you actually see fruitful results. The time you take away autonomy and you actually start micromanaging things, let's say, for example, you have ministerial policies.
Okay.
So any organization, and in this case we're talking about education, so any school that you're a part of has to meet certain ministerial criteria, which are policies. And if they meet them well, they're licensed to operate. And then besides that, you have in-house policies. This is something that I've kind of talked about before as well, and something that exists regardless of what industry you're in. So in the educational industry, when you have in-house policies, you're allowed to have them, but they shouldn't contradict ministerial policies.
Gotcha.
So things that work really well is when in-house policies complement ministerial ones. Not to say that ministerial policies are to a T perfect. Obviously, there's room for improvement. But when you have in-house policies where you kind of micromanage people, for example, you have a really good teacher. They're amazing at teaching. When they're in the classroom, they grasp the attention of the students really well. They do tactile activities. The concept of VAC, so visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning. So when you have these three things combined, so visual learning, obviously you have visual aids in the class nowadays with digitalization. You've got your smart boards or projectors, whatever the situation is. Then you have auditory learning as well. So you're actually listening to the teacher, you're listening to other students, there's pair work involved and whatever. And then you have kinesthetic. Kinesthetic, or kinesthesia itself, basically means tactile activity, so hands-on. So how good is your hands-on approach to whatever you're doing? If you have a lack of any one of these three elements within a classroom, within a lesson, believe it or not, the students haven't gotten everything out of the lesson. The teachers haven't gotten everything out of the lesson, and you haven't done your job.
Right.
Unfortunately. Because in a class, and I say this with utmost confidence and with all the research that I have done, that I've read, the educators that I've sat down and spoken to in different manners and different walks of life as well, you would see a note that every single child, every single student, whatever capacity they may be in, has a skill. Everybody can amount to something. That means everyone has some form of talent, right? How do you get that talent out? Unfortunately, standardized teaching methods, which are kind of losing their flavor now, I would say, right? I mean, with new age, new things you keep developing. Like
technology as well, the influence of technology in our education has changed things so much, especially in the last couple of years. I've turned everything virtual. So a lot of students have not had that in-person interaction to really explore these 4 different areas that you talked about. So they're all sitting at home, parents supervising them. again, like, is that something that, we need to relook at, because that we're put in this situation because of the pandemic. But now, moving forward, they are kind of adapting some of these things. So what are your thoughts with respect to technology? Is it actually helping with the way we learn? Is it kind of making it more of a pain? Because, not every student can sit in front of a computer and give you undivided attention for quite a bit of time. So what are your thoughts on that?
So when it comes to technology itself, we're in a trend-based era. So that means that technology has to develop on a yearly basis, if not, on a monthly basis, all right?
Yeah.
You have new mobile phones coming out, so you have the iPhone 10 going to the iPhone 11, 12, 13, 14. It's going to keep going on every single year.
Yeah.
It's not that it's required, it's that it's a trend.
Yep.
And everybody wants to have the latest model.
Phone, yeah.
So when it comes to digitalization and a techno-savvy era of education, obviously what people are trying to do is they're trying to mix the concept of education with the concept of updating yourself every now and then. And these things aren't that healthy, to be honest with you. It's not that they're bad. It's how do you fully utilize it. So if you take a look at education from a technology point of view, what ends up happening is that you have a student who's sitting and they're using some form of visual media platform to communicate with their teacher. So you have Zoom, you have Skype, you have WeChat, whatever you're using. At the end of the day, when you're communicating with the teacher, you're almost always able to do a tactile activity. You have visual aids all over the place, and obviously you're hearing things because of technology. But to get used to something will obviously take time. Hybrid learning is not an old phenomenon, but it's not a new one either. It's something that has been tested before. Right. And with hybrid learning, the biggest issue you have is proctoring what students are doing. So I'm going to take Elon Musk's example over here. Okay. So Elon Musk, when he talks about education, he says something really grand and amazing. He says that the reason why kids play video games, and you don't need to supervise a child when they're playing a video game. Why? Because they have a personal interest to it. They have something invested in it, whether it be their mind, their interest, their time, their money, whatever it might be. If you take a look at education with the same merits and with the same dynamic, what you are looking for is actually having students develop an interest into what they want and making education into something that's game-based. When it becomes game-based, they don't need to be proctored anymore. And they actually have an interest. Right. So you have that same scenario that you said, that a child is looking at their screen for hours. How are they going to pay attention? Let's look at the same analogy when they're playing a video game. They could be playing a video game for 4 hours straight. Are they paying attention? Yes, they are.
They have to be.
Right? Yeah. Because they're involved in it in some way or form. Yeah. But if you're looking at a lecturer, or if you're just listening to a lesson, obviously there's some part of you and some attention span that you have that's not going to meet it completely. Right. But if you make it more autonomy-based, where students are on task or they're doing something, you've got yourself some interest. Right. You've got yourself a solution.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a really, really good point. Yes, I think the way that we teach has to really change, I believe, like when it comes 100%. To different students. And right now, we're going to touch on this a little bit later, there are different types of generations that are... This is the first time they're going in, and now the teachers are adapting to the whole, coming back with the whole mask and all these kind of things. And now it's a completely different phase. True. And now with everybody's required to have a smart device with them in order to take it into their school and stuff. That adds another complexity too. Though, are they actually just using the educational programs on their smart device? Maybe, maybe not. They also have cell phones these days. The kids that are so young are carrying cell phones. That to me is a little bit of a danger zone, personally speaking.
Well, see, here's the thing. Again, things can be dangerous in any way or form. Let's say, for example, you take a scenario of a family that moves from one country to another, that immigrates to another country, such as the common story of Canada. Yeah. Right? Most of the people, we live in a diverse country. Why is it diverse? Because it welcomes people from all over the world. Yeah. So when people come from a certain country, a certain culture, a certain background, they are faced with certain apprehensions when they come into this society. All right? They want to integrate, but how much do they integrate? And then they feel that their values and culture are really strong too, and they don't want to let that go either. So the product is your child. And how is your child going to have the best of both worlds? Very simple. It's upbringing, right? Very simple. It's your parents being your role model. Very simple. It's your parents actually bridging that gap to communicate with you. We talk about the generation gap. I mentioned this in one of my shows as well, and I think that it's worth saying again that a new study shows that a lot of millennials who've become parents now, for those who have tried to make their children's interests their own interests, so let's say they sit down and play video games with their kids, or they watch cartoons with their kids, and they're well versed with the characters and everything around them, they actually gel with their children better. And once you have that, children actually listen to you more. Instead of the phase that, what does my dad do? My dad works. What does my son do? Oh, he's in school. He's supposed to be studying. So there's no more vague area, and there shouldn't be a vague area when it comes down to it. So when it comes to them using an electronic device in terms of their educational mead or modium, then basically if you have your child understand the concept of technology and the concept of education, and if it is something that they could personalize with, believe it or not, they will use it for education. Not all the time. And they're not supposed to use it all the time for that too. I mean, even now we have game-based lessons happening as well. So it's called gamification, right? So a huge part of my own degree that I did in master's was gamification. Gamification means you bring gaming and you bring education onto one fold in one thing. So when you merge them together, you actually get more fruitful results because you have something that's more interactive and people have autonomy basically, whether they be the teacher or the student. So if you have a device, believe it or not, they're going to use it for all kinds of social media platforms too. But they will know how to use it for education as well.
Absolutely.
And that's the main thing.
Yeah, I think a games kind of gets kids excited about things. 100%. So they're like, oh, you know what, let's play a math game or a programming game or something. 100%. It's a good way to trigger their mind into another level. So it's a great technique that people are using.
100%.
So, Salman, I want to ask something about, basic formal education. So in Canada, specifically, everyone is required to do some sort of basic, education. How important is, informal training that, as educators or parents or just a society, how important is that for their own child's best interest? And can you give us some examples of what that informal training is like? Because, you can't learn everything in school. Like school teaches you, math, science, phys ed, this, that, etc. But there are always these, people skills, leadership, all that kind of stuff. It's supposed to come in. But I think we as a society, we are supposed to give them these informal trainings. So can you share some thoughts about what that really looks like and what should we be doing in our today's society for a better generation coming up next?
So there are a few points that I can decipher and take out and tell you from this.
For sure.
Number one is that basically nowadays a sad reality is that parents send their children to school expecting them to get everything. And so parents are like, I'm busy with my business. Well, guess what? Your first business is your child, right? But you have this trend that is going on and people haven't really seemed to catch on to how they're supposed to be dealing with education, especially in terms of their children. Schools, when they give that basic form of education, now that too, you have to raise some flags here. Why? Children are expected to get straight A's. That's the expectancy regardless of who you are, where you are, and whatever the case is, unless your family culture is different. Now, when you get basic education, it's all well and good. You have to know your basic math, you have to know your basic science, you have to know different things that can help you through life, basically. So when you're actually working, you could be an IT specialist, but you have a bank account. So you need to know the concept of debit and credit. And without knowing these concepts, without learning them in school, what's the point of it? But you don't need to get an A in it. You need to be able to pass it. That's the main thing. All right, you could be a C student, all right, no problem. In fact, every single principal out there, or vice principal out there, or parent out there who comes and complains about grades, let's be realistic. How many people were straight A students who are putting those complaints forward? All right? I mean, this might be a hard bullet or something to chew down, but at the end of the day, it's a reality. A reality is that none of us were on top of our game the whole time. So you can't expect kids to be there too. But with basic education, you end up finding out flares where children actually excel. So you have a child who's good at art, you have a child who's good at math, you have a child who's good at science, and interest peaks out. When that interest peaks out, that is their domain. That is what they should excel in. That is what, at home, in their general vicinity, with their teachers, with counselors at school, that's what they should be focusing on because they actually have a future in that.
Right.
But if you focus on everything across the board, you've just got a confused child.
Right.
You've got a confused student. And a confused teacher as well, a frustrated one, expecting their students to get A's.
And everything.
It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen that way. So when it comes to the informal part of education, when it comes to etiquettes, when it comes to being able to talk, that public speaking bit, all of these things come to a person through experience. So here's the thing. you're not going to know how to swim. You can learn about it, you can watch videos on it, you can read books about it, but you're not going to learn how to swim until you step into that water. So give a child an opportunity to speak at a public gathering, whether it's a family meeting, whether it's like, people getting together. Give a child an opportunity. And when I say child, I don't mean they have to be really young or, in their late teens or whatever the case is, but give them an opportunity to actually speak. Give them an opportunity to be heard. You give them that opportunity, you will understand just how much water they're in. And they'll understand that too.
For sure.
And then you can work on that with them.
Right.
So the point is that you give them that experience. So informal education, it comes down to practical skills and life skills, right? Schools are doing their best to teach life skills nowadays, which is a great thing. But an unfortunate part is that how much can they cover when a child is being bombarded with all these other subjects, coursework, books, assignments, and all these other things.
Exactly, and there's only so many hours in a day that a kid is in class as well. So the majority of the time is, outside, socializing with family events and stuff. So that's a really great point. Like, being in a social gathering and giving them the opportunity to, hey, do talk about a topic that you talked about, or do a song or something like that, right? Like, just give them that exposure. So this has been really good, Salman, but we will be taking a short commercial break, and we'll dive into some common issues that we find in schools right after this for our next generation. So stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back.
पूरे ऑन्टेरियो में लाखों लोग अपनी कोविड-19 की वैक्सीन हासिल कर चुके हैं। हेल्थ कनाडा की मंजूरशुदा तमाम वैक्सीन्स महफूज और अस्पतालों, डॉक्टर्स के दफातर, फार्मेसीज और अवामी वैक्सीनेशन के मुकामात पर हासिल हैं। अपना किरदार अदा करें, अपनी वैक्सीन हासिल करें। 300 जुबानों में मदद के लिए ontario.ca/book वैक्सीन पर जाएं या 1-888-999-6488 पर कॉल करें।
आपकी रिहाइश ऐसी हो जहां जिंदगी की सहूलत मयसर हो, जो आपको बुलंदियों पर ले जाए, तो मिलिए रियल एस्टेट मार्केट के एक्सपीरियंस्ड रियल एस्टेट प्रोफेशनल अमित ओबेरॉय से। GTA में रियल एस्टेट मार्केट के हर अंदाज से वाकिफ। आपको घर खरीदना हो, बेचना हो या करना हो मुनाफे का इन्वेस्टमेंट, मेरे तजुर्बे से आज ही फायदा उठाएं। आज ही कॉल करें अमित ओबेरॉय 647-291-8102। अमित ओबेरॉय, ब्यूटीफुल होम्स यू कैन अफोर्ड।
Zoc. Now it's fully renovated. Live catering, barbecue, तंदूर, जलेबियाँ और फ्रेश नान। तकरीब आपके घर में हो या घर से बाहर, Zoc is providing full service now, and Zoc has opened a new banquet hall, garden event center. आपका Zoc देखकर लोग कहेंगे, क्या Zoc है आपका? Call right now 905-625-7786. Zoc वालों के लिए।
KK Travel believe in providing everyone the first-class customer service. We take care not only for your air ticket, but dignity and respect as well. We are available for you anytime on WhatsApp, even while you are in Pakistan or any other destination. KK Travels guarantee lowest prices and are open to price match any airline.
We are KK Travels under supervision of Gas Khan at 905-367-9433 or visit www.gaskhontravels.com.
Welcome back to Canadian Mosaic, folks, and we have Salman Qureshi from the TV show Think About It. And our focus tonight is on education, raising our next generation personas. So our next segment is going to focus a little bit of some of the social issues that might seem to be overlooked in our society because we're in such a multicultural environment, which is racism. So what is racism? So it's a belief that different races possess qualities they distinguish themselves from inferior or superior from another person. So being in the education field, Salman, do you feel that there is enough awareness and education to help students with these kind of situations? And how do young professionals kind of deal with this? Because once they pass the school scenario, go to the environment and go to the workplace, this still exists. This is a very real problem that exists. So what are your thoughts on this?
So when it comes to schooling systems, I believe that dedicating a day or two when it comes to racism or Black Lives Matter or giving an Orange Day out or talking about Islamic Heritage Month or talking about Diwali or Navratri or all these different things that happen, obviously you see an attempt for trying to be inclusive. Now, these are attempts that, no doubt, important and no doubt appreciative as well. Right? We appreciate the fact that wherever we live, we're getting an opportunity to express ourselves, and we have something that's dedicated to us. That's wonderful. However, you need to be able to get into the mind of people to understand exactly how they feel. Unfortunately, regardless of where you're from, regardless of what your background is, regardless of what scope you belong to, we as human beings are people who stereotype. And when we say stereotype, it basically means labelize. All right? So even if you're the best person on the planet, I mean, I'm talking about current day scenario, all right? There's some times when there's some people whose actions or characters you don't like, and so you end up painting a general population or a general sect of society in that case. And when you labelize, what you end up doing is you end up putting things into categories. When you put things into categories, you've already lost it. You can't get into anti-racism all of a sudden, all right? And basically, when it comes to the young kids in school today, and when we talk about education, even when it comes to adult education, when you go to college or university, so you have someone who's studying in a country and they do their K through 12 over there, and then they move to another country for their, tertiary education. If they're there, obviously you're meeting people of different backgrounds, different walks of life, different ethnicities, probably different languages that they speak, and different ways that they hold themselves. And these things are just as important for a person to digest. So what ends up happening is that you come up to a scenario prejudging something. Regardless of what happens, we're going to prejudge. Even if it's to the slightest extent. Let's say, for example, before the show, if someone had told me that you're going to be sitting with Prashanth and he's a lovely speaker, however, he doesn't wear a nice tie. Let's say that. I don't mean that. But the whole time, I'm going to be looking at your tie, my friend, all right? And I'm going to be like, oh, here comes...
I think it subconsciously plays tricks with your mind. Like, you're like, oh, someone told me that.
Like, he's bringing the tie, he's bringing the tie. And even if he's wearing a nice tie then, because it's been downplayed so much, for me, I'm going to be downplaying it as well. So it's basically things that we feed off of. So when you get a feed of something, you kind of, some part of your body, some part of every fiber in your bone reacts to it in some way or form. So what needs to happen here is very simple. Parents need to be educated. When I say parents need to be educated, parents of children who go to school need to be educated. So when they come to school, they need to understand what multiculturalism actually means. Now, the fact that this word racism, obviously if you go to a dictionary, it tells you that it's about someone who has a certain race, because the word race is within that word. However, the etymology of this word, if you go to the root cause of it, and you're coming into Latin and Greek and Arabic as well, and all these different places where the English language was actually had birth, you would notice that it's any difference that is despised by the other. So if you and I have any difference, and I believe that I'm superior to you, or if I have an inferiority complex, that in nature becomes racism. So you might label it as discrimination, you might label it as partialism, you might label it as, being condescending or degrading or whatever the case is. But no, at the end of the day, same neighborhood, same tree, same apple. So at the end of the day, how do people move forward from that? If you educate parents on how to deal with situations, let's say there's a child in school who goes and they make friends. If they make friends who are from different backgrounds in their school, that's absolutely fine. But when a parent detests it or just says, oh, there's a kid in your class who's from the same country that we came from, why aren't you friends with him? You're subliminally sending a message there, right? So anti-racism can only come in one way, and that is appreciating differences. So schools have all these different days, Orange Day, Islamic Heritage Month, they have, Black Lives Matter happening, they have different campaigns taking place, and all these different facets that people are fighting for equality, right? It's wonderful to have these. But to actually have children do something kinesthetic about it. So we were talking about VAC before, visual, auditory, kinesthetic. So until you're not doing something hands-on about it, you don't really care. So you actually give people an activity to go and do some research. You actually give people an activity to go and stand and speak about it, where all those informal skills come in. So when you mix these two things together, you will actually have a more anti-racist society. Will it be completely anti-racist? That's the dream.
That's actually what I was thinking about while you were speaking. Like, is that a possibility in the next 5 to 10 years, perhaps? Do you think we will live in a society where all this is kind of put in shelf, and we're all, multicultural. The whole world is a mixture of people in every single continent. Is that a reality?
So we already live in a global village, right?
We do.
We already live in a place where you can communicate with people from anywhere across the world, right? You have something on the palm of your hands that can allow you to communicate in whatever the case is. So the fact about being able to talk to each other is already solved.
Yeah.
All right? Now it comes down to ground-based reality. Ground-based reality, you talk about 5 to 10 years, I can assure you that it can be done in 1 year. It can be done in 1 year, but do you have the right tools, the right mindset, and the right passion for it? So you need to be able to direct it in the right way. So let's say you give kids a hands-on activity to talk about how, great a certain culture is, and that culture might be evident in their class. The moment someone says that, oh, people from Pakistan are really great, and textile is really good there, and FIFA, the Soccer World Cup, the balls are made in that country. Any student who's Pakistani in that class all of a sudden has a soft corner for you.
Of course.
All right, for the person who said this. If somebody stands up and says, oh, India is really rich in culture, there are over 100-something languages spoken over there, the north is known for this, and the south is known for this, and they're next to the Himalayas, and Everest is over there, any person who's Indian in the class will have a soft corner for you.
Absolutely.
You talk about Argentina or Brazil or wherever other country there is, they talk about soccer, they talk about Ronaldinho, they talk about Pele or whatever the case is, whoever can relate to it or has some kind of a string attached to that will have a soft corner for you.
Right.
And that's how you actually go about it. So you don't allow people to just stay in their comfort zone, rather you help them expand kinesthetically. And once you do that, you got yourself an answer. Will it eliminate everything? I don't think so, because obviously you're going to be in a society where there are certain things that are hardwired to our head. And when they're hardwired, these things come from your family, they come from your culture, they come from your general upbringing, and they also come from your experience. Because as a child, if someone takes a toy away from you and you're 3 or 4 years old and you're not at that full capacity of being able to communicate, that child is your enemy now. That boy's naughty. That's what's going to happen. So if Prashanth takes my phone right now or something, he's naughty right now, right?
I'm on the naughty list, folks.
All right? So what's going to end up happening is, Christmas ain't going to go good for you.
Not at all.
Anyway, so what's going to end up happening is that I'm going to look at him in a negative light. And when I look at this gentleman in a negative light, all of a sudden, I've shown signs of not being that acceptable. But here's the difference. Here's where it all boils down to. Even if you take care of racism, you chuck it out the window, you make sure it's gone from people. One thing that everyone should remember is very important. You know when they say first impression is the last impression? That's an absolute false statement.
That is so not true.
Bad impression is the last impression. The moment you make a mistake, people will hold on to that.
Yep.
The moment you say something wrong, you're a human being. You're going to get frustrated sometime, sooner or later. And the moment you get frustrated, people will hang on to that, saying that you have an issue.
Sometimes,
and that's what they're going to use to compare you or put a benchmark on your head and say that, no, this guy loses his cool too quick. Oh, this guy said this. This guy said that.
It's like you work so hard for so many years to build that relationship or friendship or something, that one trigger, people pick on it. That's it.
And I remember I went to this conference once, and it was an amazing conference on education. And there was a PhD professor, a really, really, really outstanding individual, and he was giving this presentation to, a body of, I think, 500 people. And I was sitting there too, and I went there with one of my friends, and he had called one of his friends along. The entire conversation was amazing. The entire speech, the lecture, the visual aids, everything was wonderful. And at the end, the sessions for Q&A opened up. So a question and answer session opened up. And one person, like a few questions down the line, one person asked a question. And the speaker says, what have I been coughing about this whole time? When he said that, look at me, I'm coughing now too. So when he said that, what ended up happening is that at the end of it, when my friend asked his friend, what did you think of the talk? There were many great things to take away from. But his friend responded, yeah, but he was kind of rude at the end, talking about coughing and stuff and being a bit upfront and blunt about it. So whatever negative happens, you hang on to it. And that's a disease that we have. Let alone second chances, let alone giving people a shot. We see something negative, we're like, it's negative. We close our doors to it. So regardless of how much good you've done, how much hard work you've put in, and all the other details and facts about you that state otherwise, people are going to grasp on to a conflict.
I think this applies to the workplace as well.
100%.
Because you work hard, let's say, 4 years,
100%.
5 years, 10 years. But the moment there's something, is a blip in your performance, this, that, like you said, we are humans. we're all humans. We are about to make mistakes.
100%.
So once in a while, you lose your cool, you lose that, then all of a sudden it's like, it blows up on you. It's like, oh my goodness, this is what this person's like.
I'll tell you something, and this comes from a personal story. I resigned from being a vice principal. And my reason was very simple. A lot of people are like, what, you resigned? What happened? How did it happen? It was very simple. It was basically in-house policies and ministerial policies, the things that we've been talking about. In-house policies were just a bit too bearing, and they were sometimes contradictory to ministerial policies.
Wow.
And when you would talk about that, all of a sudden a conflict would arise. And you'd be like, this conversation is supposed to be something that's healthy that we both walk away from. But the fact that it was questioned ended up becoming a negative point. And once you reach that type of thing, you have a dead end. And when you have a dead end, what do you want to do? You want to stick around and play in the mud, or do you want to take a step back and go somewhere where you could actually learn something?
Got it. Yeah.
That's basically what happens. So these are things that are actually very true, very real in all facets of life, whether you're in the working force, whether you're a student, whether it's between families, cousins, friends, whatever the situation might be. How do you come over it?
Right.
That's the main question. How do you bridge this?
Yep.
Okay?
Yeah.
The bridging part is very simple. People nowadays, how common is it, or how often have you seen someone who's made a mistake say, I've made a mistake?
Not very common.
Not very common.
Yeah.
Why? Because we've come into an age where things are so instantaneous, things are so quick, people are not prepared for the practical world, those informal trainings are not happening, that life skill is not being taken place, and kids nowadays don't have that confidence either because they're not being given those platforms to express themselves, right? So what ends up happening is very simple. They go into the workforce expecting that now they're going to learn something. Now they're going to be able to have an impact or do something, all right? And then they find out that they're not special, all right? They find out that that umbrella that they might have had, that confidence they might have had, that support they might have had, whether they be from their parents, their siblings, whoever it might be, is gone now. Nobody's going to give them a promotion. Nobody's going to fight for them at work. It's them and their own onus, right? When that happens, all of a sudden, your self-image is shattered.
Right.
And when it's shattered, who's going to stand up and say, oh, I'm doing this job, but I don't know how to do it? If you all of a sudden do that, you have a target on your back. So what ends up happening is now we're in a situation where even in the workforce, people who don't know what they're doing are quiet about it, so productivity has gone down. And when productivity goes down, you have an issue. So how do you come over this? You build autonomy. So if you tell someone that it's okay if you make a mistake, try again. It's okay you make a mistake, try again. Instead of walking into someone's office and saying, you don't look good, your performance hasn't been good, if you don't pick it up, then I don't know what the future is going to hold for you. How motivated are you to come back to work?
Absolutely not. I think it takes a lot for someone to even come up and do that to you. Like, I think people need to own it. Like, people need to come up and be like, hey, I'm sorry. Like, this has happened. Like, I will do better, kind of thing, right? So I think if people come to terms with that, I think we'll have a much more stable environment and say, like, overall. Salman, like, that was really, really informative, and thanks for sharing your story about your vice principal, because I think that's an honest opinion, folks, of what actually could possibly be happening in the education industry. So we're going to take a quick commercial break, folks, and then when we come back, we're going to shift our topic into a little bit and take a look at Gen Zs as well as Gen Alphas. Stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back.
पूरे ओंटारियो में लाखों लोगों ने अपना कोविड-19 टीका लगवाया है। स्वास्थ्य कनाडा द्वारा अनुमोदित सभी टीके सुरक्षित हैं और अस्पतालों, डॉक्टरों के कार्यालयों, फार्मेसियों और सामूहिक टीकाकरण स्थलों में उपलब्ध हैं। अपनी भूमिका निभाएं, अपना टीका लगवाएं। वेबसाइट ontario.ca/bookvaccine पर जाएं या 300 भाषाओं में सहायता के लिए 1-888-999-6488 पर कॉल करें।
Now it's fully renovated. Live catering, barbecue, tandoor, जलेबियाँ और fresh naan. तकरीब आपके घर में हो या घर से बाहर, Zoc is providing full service now, and Zoc has opened a new banquet hall, garden event center. आपका Zoc देखकर लोग कहेंगे, क्या Zoc है आपका? Call right now 905-625-7786. Zoc वालों के लिए।
KK Travel believe in providing everyone the first-class customer service. We take care not only for your air ticket, but dignity and respect as well. We are available for you anytime on WhatsApp, even while you are in Pakistan or any other destination. KK Travels guarantee lowest prices and are open to price match any airline.
We are KK Travels under supervision of Gas Khan at 905-367-9433 or visit www.gaskhontravels.com.
Welcome back to Canadian Mosaic, folks, and we are here with Salman talking about raising the next generation of personas. So our next segment is going to focus a little bit about Gen Zs and Gen Alphas. So for those that are wondering what that is, Gen Zs are folks that are born between 1997 and 2012, and Gen Alpha are folks that are born in 2012 onwards. So Salman, the reason I wanted to talk about this because there's a considerable shift between the way that they've learned, the way they are, and things like that. So one thing that I wanted to talk about is the whole, the hybrid experience that we're kind of moving in towards. These folks might be curious on that because they're interested in technology and things like that, but are we really equipped to do this? Because not every single teacher is okay with the whole, you can stay at home for a little bit, you can do all of this, you can do online. It doesn't really work. But the students seem to be, I like to stay at home and work from home. The whole work from home concept is kind of really changed, especially in the last couple of years with respect to COVID and everything like that. So what are your thoughts on this? Are the Gen Zs and the Alphas ready to take on this kind of environment with respect to the education world as well as the work industry?
So first I'm going to address one of your questions about teachers.
Sure.
So here's the thing. If a teacher cannot accommodate hybrid learning, when we become teachers and we're educators, all right, in all walks of life we have struggles, right? We have challenges, and we're supposed to toward that challenge. We're supposed to come up with it. So if a teacher says that they're uncomfortable with the hybrid learning, whatever the case is, my apologies. You don't deserve to be a teacher anymore. All right? It's my true say because, look, hybrid learning is one thing. I understand those issues where you have online students and face-to-face students at the same time. Yes, that's difficult. I understand that. But it's not impossible to deal with because I've done that myself. I've taught people who've been in class at the same time. I've had a Zoom session open teaching kids online. It's possible. It's not impossible. The point about Gen Z and Gen Alpha that you talk about, we're in the 21st century. Everything is digitalized, okay? Half of us are working from home. So if a Gen Z or a Gen Alpha individual says that I'm comfortable learning from home, what's the problem? It's about their comfort, right? When you're comfortable doing something, you can actually amount to something. And I don't mean comfort like, you get too comfortable where you don't want to move. I mean comfortable as in you feel as though this is your domain and space.
Right.
If you feel as though something is your domain and space, you can actually amount to something within it. All right? Shake it up a little bit. Give them some difficult activities to do at times. Challenge them at times. That's what people do in classrooms as well. But at the same time, I think it's absolutely fine for them to study at home or have that, bit of session happening. The only thing is that we need to be able to teach Gen Z and Gen Alpha how to maneuver through life with all these changes. Because believe it or not, we don't have all the answers. We never do. This COVID pandemic and what it's brought forward has caused us as individuals and professionals, educators and everything, to also question every single method that we've used before. We're not comfortable with what we're doing, but we're trying to meet the challenge. When you try to meet the challenge, you learn something. So there's a learning curve.
Right.
So at this moment, you're actually learning things with Gen Z and Gen Alpha. So allow that to be. Don't tell them that, oh no, you're learning and I'm telling you what to do. Because the moment you do that, I'm very sorry, the moment you think you know it all, or you're trying to come up with answers and trying to tell people, I don't know what I'm doing, the whole mistake situation that we were talking about, you've already made the biggest blunder. So what you do is you learn together. You tell them, hey guys, I don't know what I'm doing, but you know what, I'm here for it. Students don't need the perfect teacher. They don't need the best teacher. They need a teacher who excites them to learn.
Right.
They need a teacher who's honest with them. They need a teacher who they can be honest with as well. That's what building rapport means. You have that, you've got yourself a successful class, whether it be face-to-face or online.
Brilliant, brilliant response. So, Salman, so right now, the Generation Z are now entering the corporate industry. So oftentimes, they might feel that they don't really fit in really well because there's a huge generation gap. If you look at the executives and folks that are there, they've been in the industry for 30, 40 years. The Gen Zs are coming in with this mindset, oh, I get to work from home, this, that. They're not landing in well. And there's also another shift between, they don't understand the executives and folks that are much senior. they don't seem to understand how these folks operate as well. So what are some things that we can do as educators that can help with this transition? Because already there's a challenging transition going from high school to college, but now there's a bigger shift when it comes to going through the industry with the corporate environment.
So you need to figure out the optics of where you're operating. That's the biggest issue. Even if it comes to the older generation, they still have issues even if the COVID pandemic didn't exist.
Yeah.
Even if people were coming into work, there's still an issue there. What is that issue? You had baby boomers and you had boom years. The 70s, the 80s, the 90s were boom years. These are no longer boom years.
Yeah.
In boom years, the concept of shareholder supremacy came in. So a company makes money and then benefits the shareholders, so you maximize their value. So you might actually do that by actually slashing benefits off of your employees. So this is something that's been going on. It was a model that might have worked in the boom years, but now has become standard in business, and it is bad for business. And because it's bad for business, and people are still not letting it go for some reason, because you have to revise everything. If you're revising technology, you're updating everything. Update your business ethics and practices as well. My 2 cents, all right? You listen to it, okay, you don't listen to it, I'll go back to teaching. Anyways, my point is that because of this, when you have Gen Z coming in, they're lost because they're coming in expecting things from the current optics.
Exactly.
And then you have a generation that's standing that's still practicing outdated models of business. So what you need to be able to do is very simple. You need to be able to learn from the new generation. So when they have training workshops for employees, to give them training on how to do a job, I guess executives need to have training workshops when new employees come in to understand the mindset. They need to be able to know who they're dealing with and what they're dealing with. They need to be able to give them the platform to be able to speak their mind and why they're passionate about their field. You only hire me because I'm good at something that I do. I have factual, evidential support showing that I have these many years of experience, and this is what I want to do. And you're like, oh, this guy's a good candidate. Similarly, once the person is hired, they should emulate everything that they've said in an all-staff meeting. Emulate something to the executives. So the executives know exactly who they're dealing with and how to move forward.
That is brilliant. So I think another thing is who is the best person that can bridge would you say the millennials are in a good position to do so? Is it, who would that be?
So I don't think the millennials, if a millennial has an executive seat, if they're in a leadership position, then yes. But it's leadership position people. The people who hold that position, they can do it. Because they're the leaders of today. They talk about you guys are leaders of tomorrow, you guys are the future, whatever. You're the future right now, people. Who are sitting, the CEOs, the executives, the big people, you are the leaders right now. So if they don't make a step, and if they don't come closer to bridging that gap, what's a millennial going to do? What's a Gen Z going to do? What's a Gen Alpha going to do?
I think that's the story is very clear. It's to step it up, folks. Like if you are in a leadership position, if you are having new employees coming, I think you need to kind of step back and kind of learn from the new employees, as well as change your mindset in terms of how you groom a team, how do you grow them, because if you don't do that, they're not going to stick around very long.
Now, everything I say to you is based on my experience and based on me as a professional of 10 years.
Of course.
Don't take anything to heart, people who are at home. I know people might have different points of views, and that's absolutely fine.
Really fine.
But this entire aspect and this entire conversation, I think, gives us all something to introspect.
Absolutely.
And that's the main idea. We need to be able to think where we are and where we're headed.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Salman, for coming on the show. It was truly a pleasure talking about this very topic, as well as getting your insights on your experiences and your experience, so many different things. And hopefully we'll have you back again for another topic related to education, because this is so important, folks. And I think people that are in the industry, hopefully you can resonate with some of the things that Salman talked about. And if you have more comments and stuff, leave that in our comment section below as well. And make sure you tune in to Salman's Think About It, as he discusses a number of topics related to education, sports, business, and so much more on Tuesday nights, I believe. So thank you, folks, for joining in. I am Prashanth from Canadian Mosaic, as part of Awaz Entertainment. If you've enjoyed the show, please do follow us on social media. Remember, raising a next generation of kids takes the right course of action. Let's groom a better future today. Thank you for tuning in, folks, and we will see you same time next week. Take care.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.